Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder. Today is May 17th, 2021, and I have invited creative director Kat Tushim to be our guest today. Kat is currently at the Chicago-based marketing agency Upshot, as well as a board member for True Chicago, a nonprofit organization focused on supporting diverse and equitable development of young creatives. At Upshot, she leads creative teams with a focus on design and brand building. She's worked across various industries for clients like Chamberlain Group, Starbucks, Bibigo, Corona, and Subway. Welcome, Kat. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I loved that we just had this conversation about how the world has been opening up. And I'm sitting in a chair that last year, this time, I had escaped San Francisco for another part of the country. And I sat here for months in this exact chair, and life was very different. And I feel like here I am today with so much hope and, promise around us with how things are opening up. And you were saying you were feeling the same thing in Chicago.
Yeah, it's amazing to go out and see all the people out hugging and kind of getting together out on the streets. And it's just it's more of a rip of a Band-Aid than I'd expected it to be going out into the world again. Although I'll admit, like, going to hang out with people for the first time, there is a little excitement and anticipation, but also like, do I hug them? Do I shake their hand? Like, is that something we're doing now?
Well, and I've got more and more clients who, when I send out the emails or reach out to them to say, hey, I know you're shooting this week, or, your shoot's coming up. Is everything going okay? And they're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm going on the shoot, or I'm actually going to show up and I'm not going to Zoom it. And so it's exciting for our industry too, I think.
Oh yeah. Just a real game changer once again.
Exactly. I know. Right. And we were so knee deep in it. And I think as an industry, we did a really great job. And hopefully now we'll feel the rewards of being able to kind of keep at it in a, as safe a way as possible, and just start to really enjoy the collaboration and the teamwork that comes with being on set together and the creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't you, I always like to kind of start out these podcasts by hearing a little bit about how you got started in advertising and what your career path was and kind of how you got to your current position. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, I mean, going way back, it's going to sound kind of ridiculous, but it's always kind of funny that it was a piece of direct mail that actually got me into marketing in the first place. I've always been in art for as long as I can remember. And when I was living in Flint, I was surrounded by this really incredible creative community where I was painting and writing and dabbling in photography with all kinds of artists, but it was basically all for play. So I hadn't really thought of anything that I was doing as a potential career path. And if I'm being real, I wasn't really thinking a lot about my future at the time, living one day at a time, basically. And a few traumatic life events left me with this really bad bout of insomnia that I couldn't shake. So I ended up spending a lot of time at Meijer, which is a 24-hour grocery store in Michigan. And I would just peruse the aisles at all hours looking at packaging. I love design and language, and it was interesting to me to guess the psychology behind a designer's decisions. So it was during this time that I received this postcard in the mail that asked if I was the type of person to buy a product because of the packaging as opposed to what's inside.
Oh my gosh, that was perfectly targeted.
Yes. So, and it was the right story at the right moment. And it was just, getting me to where I was going faster, basically, because, I was just hanging out. And, while I don't do packaging, I do some packaging, but that really isn't where my career ended up actually being. It was that flyer kind of connecting me to this moment. And it was in art school in Chicago that the flyer was for. So it drove me straight to Chicago, where I moved out here with a box of canned food and $20 in my pocket, went to school, and have just spent every minute here since honing my skills,
That's amazing. I mean, I always think it's so fascinating to figure out how people find this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in college, I mean, we learn about marketing and you learn about advertising, you learn about PR, but it's not always the case where you can figure out the minutia about each one of those in like the individual roles that exist in it. And someplace like a very specific art school, you obviously are going to learn more about it. But it's great that you knew right from what you were reading that it was that school that you needed to be at, and I'm sure that just opened up so many doors for you.
Yeah, and I think that most artistic people that I run across, the career path that they're in today has nothing to do with what they thought they were going to be doing. And that's what I always think about, is that moment in time where I was like, wow, okay, package design, I have a passion for this. I should go for this. And I mean, I do some package design, but it is so minimal to what I do on a regular basis. But it's, to your very point, it's, as you start getting into the career path, you start realizing these small nuances that take you into directions that you never knew were available before.
And it's also this idea of access, right? Like
Yes.
put yourself in a position where you have access to a lot of different things, because at that point in your career, or I would even say sometimes at any point in your career, you don't always know what you don't know. Right. So if you put yourself in a situation where you're surrounded by things that inspire you and excite you, your eyes are going to be opened up to other things. And I think for the people who listen to this podcast, a lot of them are at different points in their career and they're trying to figure out how to get to the next place, or what is it that is exciting them about this industry. And I just think this industry is one where, like, if you can be in it, there's so many different directions that you can go, whether you're creative or account or media, or, and they all are so intertwined nowadays anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of putting yourself in the middle of it.
Yes.
Well, what are you known for on your team?
Well, I'm a through the line marketer. I've spent the last 5 years, though, focused on building brands. So in a nutshell, I'm a storyteller that helps brands kind of find and express their own stories. So at Upshot, I lead teams that are focused on defining a brand's identity, tone. I create brand campaigns, and I am especially known for leading really complex, oversized library building lifestyle shoots, where we're capturing video, stills, social, everything in one fell swoop for a brand to walk away with hundreds of unique stories for all the mediums that they touch. So a lot of storytelling, basically.
Are you coming up with the strategy, or are you working with the team to do that, and then you're helping visually bring that strategy to life? How does that work?
Sure. At Upshot, we have a strategy and planning team. So when we get kicked off on a project with for a client, they actually kind of come in. They do a lot of research, intelligence level thinking, as we call it. And they bring in a lot of strategy. But of course, as a creative team, we work hand in hand in kind of finessing and working through what would be the most meaningful to the consumer and, help express the brand, at its core.
And how long have you been doing this?
In advertising altogether?
Yeah.
I've been in marketing for 14 years now.
And what do you see as some of the biggest changing happening at the agency level and even the client level? I mean, 14 years ago, I think we've seen a lot change, and we can even put the pandemic aside for a second.
Yeah.
You could obviously talk about that if you want, but what do you think some of the biggest changes are that are happening?
Well, I think a little bit of twofold, right? Because one side of it is that there's the pandemic that changed a lot of behaviors. So I think one of the most exciting opportunities coming out of the pandemic is that the agencies are open to find talent from anywhere. You don't have to be a neighbor to be part of a talent pool that makes up our agency now. And so it'll be interesting to see the dynamic of what happens with the agency culture moving forward, if the remote working is something that will be available on a larger scale down the line. But I think also just in general, the way the agencies were working maybe 10 years ago were a little bit more siloed, right? So it's you have a brand, a client that you're working on, and you're usually staying within that group. But now I feel like a lot of people work across different brands and clients specializing in something that like a skill that they've really honed in on.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. And the point that you bring up about the remote learn or not remote learning, remote working, and what will happen in terms of it's been so positive to be able to get talent from so many other places. I know that a lot of places are trying to figure out what does that mean for them in the future, because they've appreciated that, but at the same time they recognize, especially in advertising, how important that in-person collaboration is. What is your agency talking about? Are you guys back at the office? Are you talking about going back? Is it going to be a requirement, or has it not been figured out yet?
It's not fully figured out yet, but there is no requirement to go back to the office. And I think that that's something that we'll see for the extended future. We have an office space so that people can go in and collaborate. We have conference meetings, even if it's like maybe somebody is doing some work, you're next to your neighbor's apartment or something. Now you have the opportunity to work someplace in peace. But there isn't an expectation that people would actually be coming into the office on a regular basis. And I don't think it's going to be going back to exactly the way it was.
I agree. Yeah, and it's interesting. People are, though, as we said earlier, clamoring to come on shoots, which of course makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm finding even clients doing other things, like not all photographers or production crews are comfortable yet having more people on set. So instead of everybody being on Zoom remotely, the clients and the agencies are gathering together in one place together and watching on Zoom together. And, instead of in all their different places. So I think it's interesting to just kind of see how all of that is evolving.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The shoot culture will be really interesting.
Really interesting. Yeah, I know.
I feel like we learned a lot, right? Like, I think that there's even just in the way that we approach photo shoots now, I think that there's even more efficiencies that are being made because of the way that people had started thinking about approaching them.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. I also think too, something that's really interesting that I'm managing and dealing with right now is, from the terms and conditions point of view and what we're required in terms of protocols to be following and providing to our clients. The CDC, the AICP, and now the AMA are all, they're still not advocating for having people on set, more people on set yet, right? They're sticking to those original rules, yet the clients want to come. So it's an interesting dynamic, because even though everyone's excited and everybody is like, I'm vaccinated, or I'll wear a mask, or please let me come, I need to get away. The protocols are not officially in place yet to allow that to happen without everyone recognizing that you're breaking the protocols if you do it.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting, but it's a process. It took a little while to put them in place. It's going to take a little while to kind of evolve them to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that your clients are asking of you now that are a little bit different, like creatively and maybe from a storytelling point of view? Is there anything you're noticing that kind of rises to the top there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think again, a couple of big ticket items that kind of came out of the last year of social changes, right? I think that tapping into diversity and equity has become at the forefront of clients' minds. This is something that I've always believed it was our responsibility as marketers to push for equity and representation, especially in imagery and storylines and things like that. And I think that clients, didn't have the opportunities to necessarily express those stories. And I think that this last year has really empowered brands to take stances and have voices to show a more realistic range of faces and body shapes and cultures that actually make up our population, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the interesting things, that clients have a little bit more empowerment on that level. And then the other thing I have noticed is a lot of huge content building shoots. I mean, I've been doing these really big lifestyle brand building shoots over the last like 4 or so years, but I've actually had clients asking for stuff like this more recently, where maybe they have a portfolio of brands, and to be a little bit more efficient, knowing that you can't have as many people on set, and just like some of the rules of the pandemic, they've actually been housing all of these brands into one mega shoot where we're capturing content for maybe 3-4 brands at the same time, using the same talent or spaces, or capturing video and social and still shots and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think more and more we're just as an industry trying to look for the efficiencies, because the need for content has increased and the budgets are, not all of them are bad budgets, but they, when you need content as often as these brands do, they have to find the efficiencies and they have to be able to exponentially increase the amount that they're getting. So doing something like that is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, what scares you about our industry, or is it all kind of exciting now?
I mean, it's always exciting. And honestly, I think that the only thing that, scares me, but is also really exciting at the same time, is that, we have such a large impact on society. I think it's a humbling experience when we can create something that affects a behavioral change, or knowing the difference that we can make with the types of stories we tell and how we tell them. I think that there's quite a lot of responsibility in that.
Yeah, I love that answer, which is probably a great segue for you to tell us a little bit about True Chicago and what you're doing with them.
So, yeah, I think we've hit around a lot of things already that are what makes True true. It's the story, the uncertainty of the creative pathways, the inability to maybe tap into leaders in the industry so that you can help find your right path. And so that's kind of like what True Chicago was born out of. But ultimately, it's all about educating and inspiring the next generation of creatives. So we have a goal to make creative careers more equitable and attainable in Chicago, with programs that connect young creatives with leaders in their industry. We provide educational and inspirational programs and workshops. We do portfolio reviews, or even just creating the creative community that folks can connect with so they can spark their own projects and kind of spiral into their own directions.
Oh, that's so great. And how long has that been around for?
Oh, well, the first conference was in 2017. So we've been doing it for a few years now.
Oh, that's great. It's awesome. I'd love it if you could send me more information. When we promote the podcast, I can share the information at the same time.
Oh yeah, I'll send you some links, girl.
Great. Okay, good. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the creative process. When you and I were first talking about having you be a guest, I did a little bit of reading about you, and your bio says that you help brands find and express their own stories. What is required on the agency side and the client side to help you succeed at that? It sounds pretty, to some people, it might be obvious that, a brand has a story, but we all, a lot of people recognize that you have to dig pretty deep to figure out what that is. And, what are the things that help support you to make you successful in that?
In general, we need process and collaboration in order to be successful. Whether it's building the foundational tools for a brand or finding a way to express their established story, there are techniques and questions we use internally to make sure that we find and tell the right one. If we can't get to a real human need or truth of why a product exists or why the company exists, its purpose and promise, essentially, then it's difficult to tell the brand story because it lacks a core idea that tales would essentially be weaved from. So while we have our inner workings, which include putting the right team to the right project and a loose blueprint for how we like to tackle a project, it does require a client to be open and collaborative along the way to be truly successful in these stories that we are creating. It depends on them being just as much a part of the creation process, the journey that we're embarking on here, by answering a lot of tough questions and being open to what the right answers may be, even if they don't fall within their own personal style.
In terms of collaboration, you mentioned that And I'm finding on my side, like we're being brought into the process so much earlier than we used to be because people are kind of valuing that input from so many more people than they used to. Like, are you finding that you're inviting people into that process sooner on your end as well?
Yeah, I mean, the way I personally like to work with vendors is I always like to have an idea that is something that a client is sparking toward, our team is sparking toward, and then bring a vendor in when that idea is not fully baked, but has a little bit of legs, and then actually collaborate to bring the story to life in a richer way because I think that it's really important that everybody brings their expertise to the table to really make something sing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like, when I first started my career, you'd get a layout. It wasn't even like a spec sheet because at that point you were literally taking a photograph of, an actual image that was concepted already, right? And so they'd really need us to stay on script. But I think nowadays people are looking for us to bring something unexpected, and bring, a little bit more, help evolve that story a little bit more and bring something unexpected. I think that's just really important. And I'm finding that that's become a major criteria for us to be considered is, what else can you bring to this project? And I think a lot of that comes up with the treatments as well.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. I find that I'll often have, I mean, I'm a meticulous planner. Like I like to go into, especially if I'm doing a big photo shoot, I'll go in and craft every single story, think through every single prop, all that kind of stuff. So we have like this really robust, map to getting this photo shoot off the ground, let's say. And then when I meet with photographers or directors, I like to talk them through this mapping that I've created, and what I'm looking for in a conversation with them is for them to add and plus up anything that I'm doing or to offer a reason why we might not do something. Like I think that that's like when you actually create the best work is when you are allowing people with their natural talents to come in and amplify an idea.
Yeah, I think that mapping is so important because, even though you're taking still images, you really are directing a scene because
Mhm.
from that, you need to get that library of images. So you need to have a story. And it's not just the story of, here I am going to, get a cup of coffee, or, oh, here I take this drug, therefore I now can ride my bike. The story is needs to be much bigger than that so that the director, photographer, creative, and talent can kind of act that story out so that you can then kind of find these authentic moments that are happening in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone onto set and thought, oh, this is going to be a night shot or, whatever it is. And then we get to the actual location and then there's this beautiful light that comes through one of the windows. And on the spot, we decide, nope, this is now a morning shot and we're
Yeah.
going to have light in it. And, or even talent coming on the scene. Like you think, okay, I'm going to pair these guys together because they're going to work out great and they look good together. And then you get on set and you find somebody else has better charisma with somebody else. And you just, that's part of the
Yeah.
process is being flexible once you're on set to allow the creative process to take place there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, being nimble and resourceful, like up until like you're shooting, it's like, and while you're shooting is so important because if you're going to tell the story, you have to recognize, just like all those things that you said, these two people might be better together to tell that story, or the light might be better here. And I think, and if you've got that story figured out ahead of time, you and your team can more easily pivot when you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Who are the final decision makers when it comes to choosing the talent that you're going to use?
Choosing talent as in actors.
Oh, sorry. I mean, like your creative partners, like a photographer or director.
So that is always a little bit of a mix. I'd say it depends on the client. It depends on the relationship, like how new the relationship is from our end, even. but usually, I've more often than not had clients go with the talent that we're suggesting. Sometimes they might take somebody off of the table for one reason or another that you can never anticipate. But usually they'll end up going with the recommendation, especially if you've got like a nice, rich story to explain to them why they would be the best option.
And how about treatments? How much do they play into your decision-making process, and do you share them with the client? And do your clients read them and appreciate, they take so much time and energy and effort to create, and I'm talking days sometimes. So, for the photographers and directors who are listening on this end, I know they would love to hear that they are actually read and used and worthy of that time.
Sure, sure. And I get that entirely. Like I've gotten some really beautiful treatments from photographers and directors that really have been part of the final decision of what sways me in one direction or another. Just in like, maybe it's something they said that actually links to what we're doing in a project. But as a brand builder, I'm often, trying to find talent that is bringing something unique to the table. And so I'm often looking for new partners. And in order for me to confidently like go in to a client and be able to sell them in, having the treatment is sometimes what we use to sell that in. For instance, like if a client works on coffee and there's a photographer that we know, like they're going to kill this assignment. They just have all the right emotional connection with the lifestyle, the lighting, the everything, but they don't have any coffee shots in their entire portfolio. Sometimes that can be something that sways a client from using them. So if I have the treatment, then I can go in there and showcase like, they haven't done coffee in the past, but this is why you really want to use them, is because everything they're talking about aligns perfectly with your mission, your statement, your brand identity, the story that you're trying to create.
I love to hear you say that because, we've spent a lot of time with each one of our artists when we first bring them on is figuring out what their brand values are and moving them beyond this idea that like their brand is still life or lifestyle or natural light, right? For years, that's how they branded themselves. They were the kind of top of their game in that category. But they really had to, at least we went through this exercise with them of getting them to really dig deep and figure out what were the experiences in their life that influenced their values and what is it that they value, empathy, curiosity, shared humanity, belonging, all of these things are individually aligned with each different photographer in our group. And when it's time to create a treatment or share their imagery for a client, it's much easier to align them with that client's values. One of my photographers, Tim Tatters, is fearlessness, and he is attracted to brands like Nike, the big sports brands, and also with a lot of pharma clients, that idea of being fearless in the face of maybe some sort of illness. And we're able to use those words. And so it's given text and richness to the imagery that's, helped our treatments and helps clients like you or creatives like you sell them into their clients.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just, I loved hearing you say that.
Oh, good.
Okay. So do you feel like there's anything that clients or agencies need to be better educated about in terms of the process? And then along those same lines, reps and photographers or directors, I feel like we've had a long year of aligning what we need to be doing in terms of production and being very specific about it because of the pandemic, which was a great opportunity for us all to kind of get on the same page. But is there anything still standing out for you in terms of like, oh, I wish clients really understood that, we really do need enough pre-pro time, or I wish reps got that, like, we can't charge that much for this, or
Ultimately, I always think about like just, pushing back on things. I think that there's a common misconception that, just because somebody says it's this way, this is the way it has to be. And usually it's like at the root of it is somebody made a comment and they tried to find a solve without knowing what somebody else might bring to the table. So to me, I think asking questions, I think that far too often, people can just say, okay, yeah, well, we can make that happen. When if you ask the question, like you might end up finding that there was a different challenge that they were trying to solve for, and there's a better solution. So I think that, like, again, it's just a communication thing. I go into clients with a lot of rich storytelling and background into why we're doing things a certain way. All the little details that we might take for granted along the way. I always try to remember to explain those to a client along the way, because while we're going on, I mean, personally, like I'll go on 8 to 15 shoots a year. You guys are probably going on every single week, but a client might only be going on a shoot once or twice a year. So remembering that they aren't doing this on a daily basis means that we have to explain things that you might think would be unnecessary.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point, because there's a lot of times that questions come up, and while the answers seem really obvious to us, the patience and the care and the kindness that comes with just explaining and educating someone goes a long way sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, how are people marketing to you right now? I know it's hard because obviously we can't come into the agency, and I'm guessing email is a big part of it. But how are people getting your attention when they want to show you new work or try and inspire you?
So right now, mostly email or LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely getting a lot of, and in a variety of ways too. Like it could be a newsletter, or it might be just like a single image, or it might be a link to a blog they started creating or something. There's a lot of different ways that people have been connecting. And, I think that, and I know it's going to sound terrible when I say it, but I think that for me, and it's probably because I am a marketer, and so I always want the quick, quippy understanding of what it is that somebody's trying to, why they're trying to connect with me. And so if it comes to me and it's a long story that I have to read, I mean, I'm getting hundreds of emails every single day. I don't really have the time to read through a whole story. So unless there's something that kind of sparks that interest right away, where it's just happens to be visual language or treatment or something that aligns with some creative that we're in the process of working through. So for me, I think that the ones that always catch me are usually, it'll be a single image, and it'll be something that is incredibly natural or unique, or just kind of just beautifully crafted. And I'll take those and I store them away for later. I always try to collect what people are doing and use that to my advantage in the future. Yeah, a lot of emails.
Yeah, I know. Just being the one on this side, creating the emails and trying to keep them interesting. We're using lots of different techniques, and we're just trying to also pull from the news and the industry news, right? And share, either align ourselves with something that's going on, or just pay attention to what's going on at your agency. So maybe emailing, Upshot as a congratulations if they won something, or, so that it gives you a moment of like, oh, it's relevant to you, as opposed to trying to catch your attention with an image all the time. And we find that our open rates when we're sharing something of relevance is far higher than when we're sharing work, which is completely normal, because, it's relevant. We know at the moment that particular thing is relevant to you, so it's more likely that you'll pay attention.
Mm-hmm. I do have to say though, like when I was in the office, I had tons of direct mail pieces, and I don't know if other creative directors work in the same way, but I would collect those, if it's a photographer that strikes me for maybe they do really great lifestyle, maybe they do really great food photography, maybe they shoot food in a way that I'd never thought of, or just feels really fresh and different.
I miss the direct mail a lot.
Yeah.
We had a lot of success with direct mail, and we did always struggle with it because for a long time, it's been being seen as kind of wasteful, right? All the paper and stuff. But we really honed in our lists and made it very, very, very targeted. And we had a lot of success for it with it. So it was a bummer to see it go because people like you really appreciated kind of just getting something in the mail and seeing it and seeing how beautiful it was.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if that comes back because, I mean, just to harken back with maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just a sucker for direct mail, but even some of the photographers that I've used, it'll be like I'll be on a hunt for a photographer for weeks and I'll have gone through like 50 or 60 photographers and I'm just trying to find this perfect look. And all of a sudden, somebody's direct mail piece hits my mailbox, and I just call them, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
It's just like a serendipitous, right?
No, I miss that. I do miss that. And then like walking into somebody's office and being like, oh my God, I sent you that. And they're like, oh my God, that's one of my favorites. I've hung it up. And so hopefully that'll come back at some point in some way. I do know that our photographers in our group and directors are trying to find unique ways to share their prints. So whether we're creating prints or little booklets, so we're not sending out 2,000 or 3,000 anymore. We're sending out 100 and 150 to like special clients and, special targeted people because there is an appreciation for that. And we do work in the print world, even though so much of it is in a digital space. Those of us that are attracted to photography and imagery appreciate seeing it in the printed format.
Yep.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up here, and I always like to end with the same two questions. The first one is, what is your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And the second is, if you weren't a creative director, what would you do if you weren't in advertising?
Sure. Yeah. So on Sundays, I like to get up early. I sit in a cafe or just outside and I like to write or draw or read for hours. It's both really relaxing, but it also feels like I'm accomplishing something. So it's like that really nice balance to start out a Sunday.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And then if I wasn't a creative director, wow, it's hard to answer. I'm not a girl that's lacking in any passions, so there's a lot of directions I could go here. But I guess it would have to be being an author or an illustrator or a combination of them, like a graphic novelist, maybe.
Oh, that's cool. Well, and I love thinking about that question too, in terms of like, okay, what? So I don't have to think about money. I don't have to like, what if I didn't have to have a, career that paid for my life? What would I choose is very different.
Oh yeah.
So I like that. I like the author one. I'd like to have a gallery someday, although that's kind of the same thing, I guess, is what I'm doing. So a little bit the same. So maybe an author. Maybe we can write a book and illustrate it together.
Yeah, I dig that.
Collaboration works. Well, Kat, this has been so, so great. I've just, we've gotten to know each other a little bit on the outside between, working at Upshot and talking about different projects together. But it's really been great to have an extended conversation like this with you. And I really appreciate you agreeing to be on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat like this.
Absolutely. Well, and the world is opening up. I feel like our conversation is so much more positive than the last couple of podcasts I've done over the months. So this has been perfect.
I get to be part of the change.
You're part of the roaring 20s that are happening now. So. All right. Well, enjoy your day.
All right. You too.